If everyone can make their way to a seat, we will begin just momentarily. Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday and welcome. I'm Craig Corbin, Director of Public Sector Partnerships with Ready, and it is an honor today to introduce the gentleman who has been a driving force behind this conference. And while I haven't been to every edition of Mountain Connect, I've been fortunate to attend a majority of them. The evolution of this event and growing impact of Mountain Connect is unbelievable. It's nothing short of amazing, and there are many reasons for that. You know, if you examine the lives of those who achieve success in a competitive environment, more than likely you will find a healthy dose of athletics somewhere in the mix. That's very much the case with the man at the helm of this conference. Yes, he played sports like basketball, baseball, football, tennis, and golf, but he also competed at an international level in what is widely considered to be one of the most rough and tumble sports ever, rugby. That's right, rugby. When I learned that little nugget of knowledge, it all made sense. You know, rugby, a sport requiring a demanding, indomitable spirit, an unwavering commitment to collectively move the ball across the goal line. Just exactly the traits required to nurture what, in its infancy, began as a gathering of a couple of hundred folks out on the western slope, the gorgeous, breathtaking views in Vail and Keystone, to what it's become a decade later. That evolution and impact are largely due to the man with an indomitable spirit, the unwavering commitment to advancing our collective efforts in bridging the digital divide, connecting those that are unserved, underserved, a man fueled with curiosity and a passion for exploring new technologies capable of speeding up that process, a man who has worked tirelessly to make Mountain Connect a shining success, and a man I'm privileged to count as a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of Mountain Connect, Mr. Jeff Gavlinski.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning and welcome to Mountain Connect. It's a real honor to be here with you as we celebrate our 10th anniversary. It's hard to believe it's already been a decade of hosting this event, watching it grow, and more importantly, witnessing the transformative changes that have taken place in this industry over that period of time. I remember our first event like it was yesterday. We were a small group of passionate advocates committed to making a difference. Today, we stand together, stronger and more committed than ever, and I'm incredibly proud of what we have accomplished here. I often get asked how Mountain Connect is different from other industry events, and this question is really about, our ability to stay true to our core principles. And those core principles are, 1, we exist to help those who need it the most, with a primary focus on the Tier 3 and below ecosystem. 2, we are not afraid to have honest and realistic dialogue here. 3, we remain agnostic to the technologies delivering broadband. And finally, number 4, we encourage disruption, always including topics on our agenda that challenges forward thinking. I hope that you see those core principles embedded within our agenda this year. We are very grateful to the 30 state broadband offices for contributing to our agenda at such a pivotal moment in our industry. Beyond that, we've assembled a core group of industry experts for you to learn from and engage with over the next 2 days, culminating in a timely but spirited debate between a fiber-first approach versus the inclusion of wireless technologies and a hybrid network strategy for BEAD. You won't want to miss that debate. Now, I would like to acknowledge and thank the small but dedicated team behind Mountain Connect. Without their hard work and determination, none of this would be possible. So Doug, would you please stand up? And would everybody join me in giving him a big round of applause? It's a real honor to work alongside you. Thank you. I also want to thank our sponsors, our exhibitors, our speakers, and of course all of you, our attendees. Your continued support and collaboration are paramount to finally closing the digital divide. And finally, I would like to highlight that we're the last independent broadband conference left in the US. We don't have members, and we're not part of a bigger organization, yet we retain a pivotal industry voice and continue to grow. I know there are many conferences you could choose from, and I'm humbled that you've chosen to be here as we celebrate a decade of serving our communities across the US. Thank you. Together, we will continue to push the boundaries and shape the future of this industry. On behalf of the Mountain Connect team, thank you. Now, I thought it would be fun to take a look back at Mountain Connect over this past decade, and even further back to its very foundation. So in order to do that, I would now ask Corey Bryndal and Audrey Danner to come to the stage. Corey is the original founder of Mountain Connect, believe it or not. And as he transitioned away in 2013, he handed his vision of this conference over to myself and Audrey. You guys need to come up here now. No, you could sit closer. I did take a shower. Sit closer. I am sweating, but I did take a shower. And I use soap. Okay. Welcome. Really, really great that you guys are here on this occasion. Really glad to see you both. And so, Corey, I want to start with you as the original founder of Mountain Connect. As I recall it, way back when, Mountain Connect was started as Colorado was awarded a BTOP grant, and Mountain Connect, as I recall it again, was really focused around how do we uplift our Western Slope communities with that BTOP grant and the fiber that was promised to connect all of our school districts in Colorado. So why did you start Mountain Connect, and what was your original vision for the conference?
So hello everybody, and thanks for being here. Jeff, thanks for the warm welcome and bringing us back into the conversation. I've been kind of haunting the group for a couple years now again. So the original idea really wasn't focused around BTOP. Initially, the focus was, we're all dealing with market failure to some degree. We have great distances and we have challenging geography, and it's really tough for our internet service providers, whether it's the large ones or the small ones, to invest in areas they don't get a lot of return on. And the capital is one part of the equation, but the operating those networks profitably, it just doesn't pencil out really well. It's a very tentative equation to make work. So we were looking at public investment that was being made around Durango and trying to figure out, how could we take the lessons that we were learning there, Durango, Cortez, kind of the southwest area, and how could we take that and spread that awareness? How could we educate people and share that with Steamboat Springs and San Luis Valley and on and on? So I was coming back from the San Luis Valley, and I thought, gosh, we got to start getting these people together because we're having the same conversations over and over. We're talking about redundancy. We're talking about gigabit speeds. We're talking about what is a carrier neutral location, what's a little equipment room to have co-location. And we're going through the basic telecom fundamentals. And I thought, gosh, we got to get these people together. It was later, in 2012, after the BTOP award had been made to a group of school districts here in Colorado, and that project, quickly went off the rails, and immediately the conversation turned, and we decided, if they're not going to communicate with us, we're going to get really good at communicating, and that's what this is, and we're going to get good at our craft. So it really was community focused. It was a very regional model, and that's, I think, how we all met, actually.
It is, indeed. So you've been back here a couple of times over the years. So I would like to get your thoughts on whether or not you think that this conference, despite its growth, has maintained following its own core principles over the years, as I talked about up on the podium.
Yeah, the two things I see here are participation and education. I see people sharing. So initially when we founded the conference, I kind of had the NANOG, the North American Network Operators Group model in the back of my head. And NANOG was kind of like Black Star Wars t-shirts and Linux laptops, that kind of stuff. But we got our community members together, and we were able to provide, we were able to share. And in doing that, people were learning and asking questions and getting better. The sessions that I've attended and the ones that we've presented from our small group, I see that happening actively. Is it larger? Heck yeah. Could I have created this? Absolutely not. So Jeff has created an incredibly complete conference. He's brought people in from places with knowledge and awareness and skills and assets that we didn't have as 150 or so people in the Western Slope. So yeah, you've hit the ball over the fence, grabbed the ball, and hit it again.
Thank you. It's very kind of you. Audrey, so good to see you again.
It's good to be here, Jeff.
You look, retirement is treating you well.
That's right.
So in 2014, you and I embarked on a new journey together. So when you and I remember sitting at your house talking about this, but I'm curious, and I'm sure some of these people here would like to know, what was your original vision for this conference?
Well, coming from a very small community, I lived in Craig. Jeff at the time was living in Bayfield, Corey in Crested Butte. We were small town folks, right?
Yep.
And we knew that you had to apply the principles of talk to your neighbor, ask some good questions, develop an agenda for any time you're getting together, and of course bring a flip chart and marker pens. That was back in the old days. Those were things that we needed to discuss what we needed to figure out for the future for telecommunications. Just a bit of levity for this conversation, because telecommunications were deregulated in 1996, and there were some of us just getting started in this new high-speed telecommunications industry. Broadband wasn't a word, unfortunately, that sort of thing. But Jeff, you have brought this along, and you've brought all of us along, and it's been a wild ride, I tell you. Some of the things I've found, what you can find on Google. Telecommunications as a technology was one of the, quote, hottest new markets to develop in years. Keep that in mind, folks. I think that's still true. This is another quote. 77% of online users send or receive email at least once every few weeks. So we have moved, and we're moving at light speed into the future. And I don't want any of you to forget that, because that's how you can maintain the education, a good agenda for a meeting, looking to the future. What are the issues you're going to resolve for your communities? Browsing information services is the killer app of tomorrow. Music television launched. Rolling Stone editors introduced music video and invited viewers to send suggestions for videos via phone, fax, email, or send us a letter. So we have moved. Telecommunications does work. And we have got to keep moving so that we can meet the needs of the future. And I believe getting together as communities, within communities, and then within larger regions, and this national effort. This is important. Colorado has been at the hub of this discussion. When Colorado was in the 2010 looking at, should we develop a state broadband plan? Okay, here we are, folks. I'll set the stage in Breckenridge, 1996, a summer day with about 25 of us with the flip chart and markers, talking about where do we go from here. School districts were the topics. Corey, Bryndal, Jeff, and I, and many of you were looking to the future. Not many of you, a few of you. Tim Miles brought a blueprint from Steamboat Springs School District. Evan Biaggi had a plan for infrastructure, a future to use that. Brian Shepard was doing some amazing things at Adams County, public service. We needed to look to the future, and I believe all of you need to continue doing that. It may seem old-fashioned, but that's how you will grow exponentially. In 2014, we were talking broadband. Mountain Connect made the leap to being a national organization and encouraging each one of you to bring your best to this discussion. Our vision was to be an enabler for resilient, inclusive, modern-day communications. Let's say our success was built on understanding broadband networks, services, and applications. Here we are today. It is a very important day in Mountain Connect's future as you embark on the next 10 years. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm not sure, 10 years, I don't know if I have 10 years in me. I used to be 6'3" when I started this, so takes a toll. So I'd ask you the same question I asked Corey. Do you think that we've maintained, you and I, this was very important to you and I think, when we began our journey, to make sure that we kept an open mind, but we also gave all technologies an opportunity to shine at this conference on our agenda, with some of our exhibitors, some of our sponsors. It was really important to us. Do you think that we've maintained that?
Well, I guess I would ask each of you, and I would ask the exhibitors, do they feel that their competitors are here? Do they feel that those who are different from them? Because we had conversations about wired, wireless, fiber, cable, all the different types of providers that were in the world. And you need to keep your eye on that too.
Right.
How we address the future issues, because that's what's happening at a local community level. And that's where my passion stays, are we serving the communities?
Right, so I have a question for you both. In the early days when we started Mountain Connect, I think and you touched on this a little bit, I think the conversations were really around communities. And I think we've kind of gone away from that a little bit. And do you still think there's value in having community-based conversations?
Absolutely, because that's where you not only, Corey and I had a little conversation this morning about how do you talk to Joe in Rifle that's going to say, okay, here's a building that's open that you can put your equipment. That's the basic level. And then we also said, in our many discussions, do we need telecommunications in healthcare? Are they really going to need it in the future? Education? I know these seem sort of simple, but that's the markets we were looking at, all of the ways that we could use and communicate with each other, use technology to communicate with each other. So yes.
Corey?
Yeah, I mean, kind of at the time we were starting this, there were two forces that were acting on us. One was the lack of investment, not being able to make those last mile kind of efforts pencil out. The other was the shift in applications. Applications were no longer in a server in the closet in the back of your building or on your laptop. The applications were moving to data centers in distant places. So we had to make the networks work, the ones that we could not fund. So you had these two forces acting on us. The only way to affect that is knowing and having awareness and knowledge of the infrastructure and the opportunities to improve it. So to answer your question, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. Have we moved the needle? And I think if you look at what's happened on the western slope, in large areas, I mean, look at Elevate's efforts, Clear Network's efforts, Visionary Broadband's efforts. You can add about 5 more Jade to the list in that group. The map has changed. Now, are we done? Absolutely not. You know, I'm undergoing a project that's got 45 separate communities building fiber laterals, building co-location facilities, and putting the optical equipment on the cabling. That's not happening in a centralized model. That's happening in a distributed model. We've tried the centralized thing before, and it's come up short. So the value in the community, and specifically the regions at this point, is probably our best route, in my estimation, to really dealing with those corner cases, dealing with the unserved and the underserved. And the fact that we're targeting 100 by 20 in 2024, to me, is laughable. Yeah. That's a 30-year-old standard, fast Ethernet, right? We should be looking at gigabit and beyond, and if you look at what's happening in Utah as an example with Utopia, these guys are setting the bar high. So as a state, I think that's the direction we should all be going.
So I know you weren't here last year, Audrey. I think you were here, Corey, last year. But for anyone else who was here last year, you might recall that I like to look forward. And so last year, I interviewed a robot. And so why did I do that? Well, I did that because I wanted to shock people on one hand. And then on the other hand, I wanted people to think about the future. So as we embark on BEAD, that is really important, because I think before people realize it, those type of technologies will be more widely used. And so having abundant and redundant connectivity in rural parts and high-cost areas of this country is paramount. So just one last question for you both, based on what I just said. What is your vision for the future of this industry?
As an industry, I think the end game is that we don't have to meet and we can be off doing other things, and this topic area has been fully addressed. Will we get there in my lifetime? You'll be less than 6'3". I'll have more gray hairs. I mean, we got work to do, right? The cases that we're triaging today are far more acute than they were 10 years ago. So as far as the future, the technology continues to do whiz-bang, cool, fun things. Really, the technology is not the difficult part of this. We've got lots of smart people in the house, and we can hire them out if we don't have them. The challenge here is the public policy. And do we make the decisions as a state, as a country, as communities to move the needle in this area and invest our time, our tax dollars, work with our private providers to assist and remove barriers for them? Those are the things that, like I said, the proof of the tasting of the pudding, or the pudding is in the tasting. If we address those unserved and underserved addresses, make the services work reliably for the applications that we need to run our communities, commerce, healthcare, education, on, yeah, then we've done it. We've got a lot of work ahead.
Well said. That is exactly the future, but yet it is not going to be probably in our working lifetimes. So we need to pay attention to that. Jeff and I have spent time, and when we couldn't get, such as Governor Hickenlooper, he wasn't able to attend, we would go to him and say, we need 30 minutes. We need to talk about broadband. And he would listen. But those public policy, Phil Weiser has been here as your Attorney General, looking at what we are doing for the future. I believe we need to continue involving, such as when we were on a community level and we would call Gigi Dennis of Tri-State at the time. I know she's not at Tri-State anymore, but Cathay Reynolds is here from CSU and various entities. They can help us then reach out further and make this message heard. So we need to use all of you, and we need your feedback. What's working? What's not? Because our conferences will continue to look different, and wouldn't that be cool if we could do this electronically and yet still have the conversations? It's when you have a conversation at the bar or a cup of coffee, that's where some of the gold happens. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you both for being here. This conference will always have a little bit of both of you embedded within it, so thank you. And Audrey, would you stay on the stage with me? Thank you. Perfect.
Thanks, Jeff.
Can you give him a round of applause, please? Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so I guess I can use this one. I had mentioned earlier that none of this would be possible without our sponsors. And now I'd like to recognize a very small but special group of sponsors. These companies have sponsored our conference all 10 years. That's a huge commitment, and I am forever grateful to all 6 of them. So I have a little award for them. So would you please welcome to the stage, from Calix, Darren Archbold, from Finley Engineering, Larry Fawcett, from Visionary Broadband, Brian Worthen, from CCOM, John Saunders, from Wave, Zach Hubreck, and from Wincom, Alex Cernick. You guys want to come down and
Up front?
Yeah, sure. Look, your dedication and contribution to this conference is greatly appreciated. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Now, speaking of great sponsors, it's my honor to bring up the one, the only, Mr. Scott Woods from Ready. Please join me in welcoming Scott to the stage.
All right, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? All right, I can tell who went to the reception last night and who was here early. We're a little bit behind schedule, but we're going to keep things going. But before we do, would like to acknowledge Jeff and his time here at the helm of Mountain Connect. I'm going to ask Doug Adams, who does all the work at Mountain Connect, to come up for a second. Jeff gets the credit, but Doug does all the work.
Thank you. You're welcome. I wanted to get Jeff something because 10 years is a big deal. So I looked up on my Google machine and I found that thankfully 10 years is not gold or silver, but it's aluminum. So I was able to afford him something. So I got him a little plaque in recognition, 10 amazing years, the premier broadband event, which I think this is because of the commitment to the content and making sure that we have all the leaders that we have here. So time flies, Jeff. I've been working with you for quite a while, not all 10 years. Time flies, and I'll just leave it at that. So thank you, Jeff.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We're not done yet. So I want you to stand here because people have been saying really nice things about you, and it pisses me off. So, I'm going to go off script just a little bit. So, I'm going to tell you 3 stories about Jeff that you don't know. And he is really one of the good people here. Please, sit down. This is not going to be the roast, okay? We're going to go off script. We're already behind schedule. He made that call. So, we're going to go off just a little because we need to honor him. But Mountain Connect to me is special for a number of reasons. It is one of the only independent conferences left. But for me personally and professionally, just a few years ago, my former boss, Alan Davidson, announced my departure from NTIA and his team as I was joining Ready at Mountain Connect when it was up in Keystone. And that's where I first met Jeff. We've been boys ever since, right? So it's been really important. I want to tell you a couple stories, just to give you a sense of how Jeff is. He literally wants everyone to succeed. So a couple of years ago, our second year of sponsorship, well, we were at the golf tournament. And so I am playing golf with Doug Adams and his wife and some other folks, and we're having an absolutely fantastic time, right? Best round of golf that Doug ever played. And Lori's putter was on fire. We're having a great time. We may have had one or two beverages, water or soda or something like that, if I recall. And Jeff pulls up on his golf cart, and he's real serious. And he had been calling me, and I'm like, Jeff, everything's okay. I'm playing golf. We're having a good time. He's like, no, I need to talk to you. He pulls me off to the side on his golf cart, and he said, somebody, your sign has been destroyed or vandalized. And so I'm immediately thinking the sign here at the Sheridan. Someone had vandalized our sign. And he goes, no, the sign on the 5th hole. And so it was like a dramatic pause. And then, excuse my language, and I'm like, somebody fucking destroyed a sign at the 5th hole? Like, are you serious? And we just bust out laughing, and Jeff was so serious. Excuse the profanity at 8:30, but hey, I gotta be me. And so Jeff was like really serious, and then we just laughed and laughed. So to the person who destroyed our sign on the 5th hole, he never ratted you out. We're coming for you. Just want you to know that. And what I mean is, that sign cost us $5,000. It was styrofoam. You will receive an invoice. And Jeff never ratted you out.
Well, I was going to say that this year I made the signs out of Kevlar.
And then the last story I want to tell you is about this year. Jeff's been working hard. Doug's been doing all the work. And I try to be a man of my word, a person of my word. I encourage everyone here to adopt that principle. If you say you're going to do something, do it. So Jeff had been calling me and texting me, and we need to talk about this, we need to talk about that. I'm going on vacation, and I ghosted him a couple times because, he can be a little intense. So just a little bit. And so I called him. It was 9 o'clock center of the world time, which is East Coast, 9 p.m. He was vacationing in Ireland. It had to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. He answered the phone, but the way he answered the phone was he dropped it and there was expletives. And he picks it up with slurred speech. It's like, I really need to effing talk to you. And then I realized, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning where you are. It's only 9 p.m., but we ended up having a discussion because he was really, really excited and wanted to know what we had planned for Mountain Connect. So those are just a few stories. I have others, but we are going to transition to our state panel in just a second. But Doug, Jeff, I want to thank you for all of your time. He looks really spiffy. I was going to rag him about the killer robot that he had last year that didn't work, that he bugged the shit out of me about, but we're not going to bring that up.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. Keep pushing the envelope. But thank you. Give thanks to Jeff Gavlinski for his time here at Mountain Connect. All right, so we're going to queue up a video for you all to see, and then I'm going to ask our rock star state broadband office directors to prepare themselves for the keynote panel this morning. These are the first to market states that we're going to hear directly from them on where they are with their programs and what they have moving forward. But before we do that, please pay attention to the monitors. Thank you. All right, so once again, I am Scott Woods, President of Public-Private Partnerships with Ready.net, and we are welcoming our heroes, our state broadband office directors, to the stage. But before we do, I want you to know this theme of our event today is called BEAD's Final Showdown. And state broadband office directors face many pressures. In many instances, they are the faces of what's going right or wrong with our country's largest investment in broadband and digital equity. They must have answers to all the questions from stakeholders, state and local officials, local communities, service providers, and many more. In BEAD's final showdown, states are preparing to launch their respective grant programs and to provide connectivity to unserved and underserved locations across their footprint. Urban, rural, tribal, while working through the details of community engagement, flawed fabric maps, overstated provider coverage, overburdened challenge processes, NTI coordination, and many more nuances that we as the general public don't generally get to see. So today's panel, we will explore the relative progress that each of these first-to-market states have made in deploying their grant programs, but also provide a behind-the-scenes view of what they and their teams face to deploy BEAD and other grant programs, their challenges, their successes, their failures, and the work that remains to be done. So without further ado, please welcome our distinguished panelists. We have with us Colorado's own director, Brandy Ryder. We have from Louisiana, the director, Vineeth Iyengar. We have Peter Vogelberg from Ohio. We have Sally Doty from Mississippi. We have the former director of Kansas, Jace Piros de Carvalho. We just announced her new role, but she came here as a former director from Kansas, but I'll let you talk about that. And then last but not least, the deputy newly minted associate director from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Chandler Vaughn. So we're going to start off. Brandy's going to start us off, but I asked the panelists to give a 2-minute overview of where they are in their states and deployment, to give you an overview of where things stand here at the beginning of August, going into the last quarter of the year into BEAD's final showdown. So Brandy.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thanks everybody for attending Mountain Connect in our beautiful state of Colorado. It is an honor to be the executive director of the Colorado Broadband Office in this historic moment. So I just want to say that it's been a journey for sure. And before I get started, I just want to say we couldn't do it without my team. I see my team members in the back, and obviously our FPO, Sarah Smith, Megan, you guys in the back. Thank you so much for all you do. And I'll jump right in. The state of Colorado, we've had a similar journey like other broadband offices, unwinding and understanding the complexities of the federal programs. And, it's something that's ongoing, but we figured it out as long as, with the guidance that we're given. Of course, I know we always say building the plane as we're flying it. We said that a couple years ago. We need to find a new term. But anyway, so Colorado, we're moving through the gating process, which I like to call. I am in an IT department, so that language is thrown around quite a bit. We have our Volume 1 approved, our Volume 2 approved, and yesterday we were told that our challenge data was approved. So there's literally nothing. Thank you so much. We're one of 2 or 3 states that have that process done. Of course, we started it in January, so I would say we're one of the early adopter states, and a great guinea pig for others. And so, but yeah, we're at a point now where we're about to open up our application for BEAD. Keeping my fingers crossed, August 30th. So we're just a few weeks away from opening up our applications for communities and ISPs, public-private sector partners to start applying to our program. So we're looking at probably by the end of the year, hopefully wrapping up most of what was required of the BEAD program. In Colorado, it's beautiful. We have all the 4 seasons. Some are longer than others. And winter, we're trying to get ahead of the winter season so that by the time all of our contracting is done, we can have those dollars start flowing next spring to those that have applied. So don't want to miss the construction season, want to start at the top of the construction season. So in 2025, that's when we'll start to see dollars flow for the state of Colorado.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Brandy. Vineeth?
Well, thank you. Actually, Brandy, thank you for hosting us as a state office for Colorado. And look, Jeff and Doug and Scott and team, thanks for inviting us to come this year to Mountain Connect. Look, we're fortunate in Louisiana that we have absolute alignment between our governor, the legislature, stakeholders that have effectively over the last couple of years have done a student body left in trying to address the digital divide. We've got a great, phenomenal team that is purely focused on internalizing the feedback that we get from, and you, Scott, you characterized us as the heroes. Really, the heroes are those folks that live in rural parts of Louisiana, Colorado, Ohio, Mississippi, Kansas, Virginia, that have been fighting for access to any modicum of decent internet for decades. So now's their sort of rural Louisiana, rural parts of every state. It's now this is their first time that they have a significant puncher's chance that they're going to receive better internet than folks that live in urban areas. And so for that, we're especially proud of in Louisiana that rural parts of Louisiana have always held us accountable in making sure we move faster and faster and faster. And so we were fortunate late last year to get our Volume 2 approved. We were fortunate a couple of months ago to get our challenge process results approved. And then similarly to Brandy, in terms of timeline, look, our goal is to obligate the entirety of the $1.355 billion, both on the deployment side, and if we're fortunate to have funds on the non-deployment side, sometime in mid-November. We go through a 30-day public comment period, we toss it up to NTIA, and then we'll put positive pressure on NTIA to approve our final proposal, because the faster we can move the execution risk in delivering internet from our offices to the providers who know what to do best, which is to build as quickly and efficiently as possible to get people internet, then that's our ultimate goal. And so the faster we can do that, the better, and that's the timeline we're operating on between now and the next couple of months.
Thank you. Peter?
All right, good morning, everybody. Okay, let's get some energy here in the early morning in Colorado. Okay, so I'm Peter Voderberg. I'm the chief of Broadband, Ohio, and we're a little bit further behind than a lot of other states because I'm known for disagreeing with the NTIA on how things get done. We have our initial proposal, Volume 1 is completed. We have finished the first round of our challenge process. We're in the validation phase of the evidence that we received. We'll be doing our rebuttal process here, hopefully before the end of this month. And we're still having back and forth with the NTIA about our initial proposal, Volume 2. We believe we're close. We think that we're very close to having our initial proposal, Volume 2, approved by the NTIA, but there are still a few things that we have to get kind of past the conversation phase with them so that we can get it up for final approval. It has been a long process. I think some of the things that slowed us down was, especially for our initial proposal, Volume 1, we had a lot of back and forth on what to do with the wireless folks in the state of Ohio. Our legislature had passed a piece of legislation that had said that wireless folks weren't eligible for grant dollars from the state of Ohio, and we had talked to the NTIA about how to have that be part of our pre-challenge modifications in our initial proposal, Volume 1, and that took a long time. So that kind of put us a little bit further behind than I think a lot of other states are, but we're continuing to be diligent. We're continuing to push ahead because, again, like the other states that are up here, we want to make sure that by the end of this year we have our application process started. We have and be well on our way to having our final proposal being ready to go for final approval with the NTIA. So Ohio, like I said, initial proposal Volume 1 done. First half of our challenge process done, and initial proposal Volume 2 hopefully done here in the next month or so. So that's where we are.
Great. Sally?
Good morning, I'm Sally Doty from Mississippi, and we also are not quite as far ahead as the leaders of the pack over here, but that is fine because we understand in Mississippi that it is so important to get this right. And so we have slowed down a couple of our processes due to some community engagement we had that we're going to talk about later. But we are starting our challenge process. We started it last week. We'll be through with that and then hope to go to the application phase by the first quarter of 25. We do believe we have enough money to reach all of our served and underserved in Mississippi. Have not quite budgeted out our non-deployment projects yet because we, again, want to be careful, know what our numbers are as we embark on those projects. But we do have a sense of urgency because this is so important to the rural parts of our state, and we're an agricultural state. We have so many great small communities that this is going to be such a lifeline for. We have such untapped resources, I believe, in Mississippi, and understand the importance of this job that we're doing right now. So I've got a great team. I believe we might have been one of the last broadband offices to be stood up in the nation. Perhaps we've learned in dog years, you know, the information as we've moved forward. But so I look out here, I see a lot of familiar faces, and look forward to working with you as we move forward.
Thank you. And Jay, before I go to you, we do want to recognize the interim director for Kansas who's here, Joseph Lay, who was your deputy, but I do want to recognize Joseph. Joseph, if you're here, wave your hand. We couldn't make the change at the final second, but we welcome Joseph here. Jade, over to you.
Well, good morning, and I do hope you all will go to Joe's panel later. He's speaking on a panel with, I think, the Western states. I really appreciate you, Scott, giving me the opportunity to join these esteemed state broadband directors. But as you mentioned, I'm no longer with the state. I just yesterday joined Bonfire Infrastructure Group right here in Denver. So it gives me the opportunity to come visit Brandy's state a little bit more. But it's always an honor to represent the great state of Kansas. So today I'm going to talk about 4 things in the timeline that might be of importance to those in the audience who are interested in applying, and that is going to be Volume 2, challenge process, subgrantee selection, and final proposal. Kansas was among the first states to get Volume 2 approval. That happened in April with much fanfare. We were excited that that would unlock the subgrantee selection process and we could get the dollars out the door. What we didn't anticipate, and what a lot of those in the industry didn't recognize, is that there would be a lengthy approval process for the challenge data. And so, as Brandy mentioned, a few states have been approved for their challenge data. Kansas was also among those. We got approval last Friday, but we submitted that data in February. It took a full 5 months. And I mention that because if you're among the first states in this program, the federal agency hasn't quite developed the processes for approval. And so when we're looking to the federal agency for guidance, we have to recognize that they've never done this either, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because we have an opportunity to maybe shape some of those policies and processes. But it is the canary in the coal mine for what is the approval of the final proposal going to look like. I'll get to that in a second. Subgrantee selection in Kansas will probably commence in August, knock on wood, like Brandy was saying. We hope to do multiple rounds until we get to universal connectivity, but it does take time, and we have to have the final proposal in by April. We don't yet have guidance on what approval of the final proposal is going to look like. Is it going to take months? We do know that the business cases for these builds are time sensitive as materials and labor continue to increase. So I would encourage everyone in this room to really advocate to the NTIA for an expedited approval process for the final proposal once it's submitted so that we can meet these deadlines, these construction deadlines. So if Kansas submits final proposal in April, we're hoping it can be approved swiftly and those dollars can start flowing into the state around next summer. It could be next fall. One other thing I wanted to mention is the pre-registration process. In Kansas, we opened that on May 13th, giving providers a full 3 or 3.5 months to do 40 to 50% of the application up front. All the attestations, all the technical, operational needs that are outlined in the NOFO, don't sleep on that opportunity. Other states are also doing that. Louisiana had a pre-qualification. I think West Virginia did too. Don't wait until the last minute because a lot of these grant application openings, windows are only 14 days, some of them are 30 days. If you can get the bulk of the application done and then just do your technical application during the window, I really encourage you to do that.
Chandler.
Yeah, to round things out, Virginia, for us, BEAD is the last leg of a lot of years of broadband deployment. We started our office back in 2017 and have been fortunate to have a lot of strong leadership to help pull this vision forward over that timeline, one of which is Dr. Tamara Holmes, my boss, who regrets not being able to be here today. She's often the firecracker on a lot of these panels and brings the heat and brings the truth in a lot of her comments. I'll try to do the same. The Virginia Telecommunication Initiative has been rolling for several years now, and we've been talking in terms of how many locations we've awarded, but we're pivoting to talk more about how many locations we're delivering construction to. And I want to highlight a little bit of that. In 2023, last calendar year, we built out broadband access through state grants to 80,000 previously unserved locations. This year we're going to do 100,000. Next year we're going to do 120,000 through just American Rescue Plan funded projects. Hopefully this is bringing into picture about how BEAD is the last leg for us. When we started back in 2017, we had about 500,000 unserved and unfunded. BEAD's going to be about 100,000 unserved and unfunded locations that we'll get to as we are able to move through the NTIA process, which our directors up here have chronicled pretty significantly. In terms of where we're at in the process, we were the first state to submit Volume 2 back last September, and we were fortunate to work with NTIA over a few months and got approval last week to keep moving with our process, and look forward to continuing to work with them on challenge result finalization.
Thank you, Chandler. And when we started this, Sally, I want to come to you with the first question. Because a couple of years ago when we were all here at Mountain Connect, community engagement and local coordination was the focus, and you mentioned that in your opening. Can you describe what you've done, and others on the panel as well, in that area to ensure that communities and your stakeholders know what's coming, you're keeping them involved, and what's been the response and your interactions as you travel throughout Mississippi?
So all of these grant programs require community engagement, and so I think all of us up here in every state has had a different approach to that. In Mississippi, we have worked with our communities. We found it always helpful to have a partner in each community, and although sometimes I needed to stay at my desk and do some work, we're out in the field and meeting with these groups. And it really helps for you to understand, helps your broadband office to understand the needs of that community, whether it is a community that's going to struggle that needs to participate in the challenge process and is going to struggle with that process to make sure they have the resources to do that. We identified a community that had some health and safety issues because of their connectivity. They just had no connectivity. There had been a recent event where someone could not get an ambulance there. So when I walked into that meeting, I was met with a lot of hostility. And what are you going to do for us? How are you going to help us fix this problem? So there are real issues out among our communities, and it really helps our offices to focus in on that. There are a lot of other stakeholders involved as well. There are providers within our state and those that may come into our state that we've been engaged in some outreach with them as well, and then other organizations within our state. I come from the world of state politics. I was in our state legislature for 10 years. So keeping those legislators up to date on what is the truth about what is happening with this BEAD program or Capital Projects Fund, other programs you may have, being that source of information for them, because there's a lot of information floating out there and it's not always correct. So our office and the state broadband office can provide that base level of information. So there is really just such a broad reach of stakeholder engagement that our offices are all engaged in on just a daily basis. And always welcome input, and in fact, we've had input from different groups who say we've not reached out enough to them. That's one reason we slowed our challenge process down. We slowed it down by 2 weeks to give some additional time for some training. So I think all of our offices are attempting our best to reach out to all the various stakeholder groups and then listen and respond in ways that we're able to.
And Vineeth, what's been your experience? Because I know you and your small team has also done a statewide approach, as has Colorado. But what's been your approach and lessons learned from community engagement?
Yeah, I mean, look, from Louisiana's perspective, there's no greater substitute than really understanding the challenges and pain points when you talk to families. And the fortunate thing is you can actually nicely and neatly segment the problems around the digital divide, around access, affordability, devices, and digital skills. No matter socioeconomic backgrounds, demographics, no matter what part of Louisiana you come from. At this point, and what's really interesting is we're all effectively running in our own way, a broadband political campaign, and from constituents' perspectives, to see is to believe. And that's why it's really important that we get the money out. We get the money out to the right providers who have a track record of not only executing well, but also executing well in partnership with the community. What you're going to see, and what's going to be the new big challenge and pain point in Louisiana, is that, frankly, no one knows where any of this infrastructure, utilities especially, exist in Louisiana, especially those that are building the infrastructure underground. And so we just passed, Governor Landry just passed and signed into law an act which effectively says that any provider that receives federal funding from BEAD has to start to inform communities 30 days in advance in terms of when the construction is going to go into those communities, so that there's really good local coordination, so there's not the disruptive activities that occur between subcontractors that break water mains, sewer lines, and gas lines, right? The other thing that's really important from a community and close coordination perspective is that a lot of the success not only is driven by the providers building in communities, but in the communities themselves, right? And so the last thing we want are constituents complaining to their local elected officials that broadband is not moving for a variety of different reasons. So we're now beginning to shift and work in parallel to ensure that communities are absolutely ready and clearly understand the expectations and know what to expect from all this investment that's going to occur between now and the next couple of years.
Okay. All right, let's move on to challenge process, because you've heard a lot of directors reference they're going through or have gone through the challenge process, working with providers and other potential applicants to narrow down exactly where these investments are going. Chandler, I want to come to you, and then Brandy, I'll follow with you. What's been your lessons learned through this challenge process, dealing with the NTIA, dealing with obviously flawed maps, dealing with providers, this whole entire process? What have you learned?
Yeah, the challenge process is an exercise in data management, right, from a state broadband office perspective. We started our challenge process with 162,000 BEAD eligible locations in Virginia. We're going to end up around 100,000 with the help of some state awards that were announced a couple of weeks back to get to 20,000 of those locations. But again, diving into the numbers here, again, we had 162,000 locations that we started out with. Our initial submission to NTIA had 900,000 inputs in it to sway where locations were served and where locations were unserved. So state broadband offices are taking in a crazy amount of data and are tasked with processing that into an output that makes sense at the community level where broadband service is and is not. We've seen a lot of unorthodox things in the challenge process in Virginia. I think a lot of the narrative gets built around overstatement of coverage, but I would venture to say that there's also an equivalent understatement of coverage. Whether that's nefarious or not is up to the group, but in terms of locations being adjacent to other served locations but being listed as unserved on the national broadband map, there's a lot of things to sift through from that perspective to make sure these dollars get invested wisely.
So with Colorado, I would agree, it is an exercise in data management. And fortunately for the Colorado Broadband Office, we've been around for a number of years, and actually our broadband office started with the map. And it was in our Office of Information Technology. It was a map that was developed using the ARA dollars back in the day after the Great Recession. And so we've been at it for a long time, and fortunately coming into the challenge process, we have been doing challenge processes through the state of Colorado's broadband office for many years because we have a well-established state broadband program. So we've been doing the challenge process at least biannually, twice a year, for a number of years. And so we've been scrubbing the map for years. And so coming into it, I felt like we had a really good foundation. And again, I want to thank my data mapping team. They've done an incredible job. We are an in-house shop. We developed everything from scratch in terms of the portal, our whole process, and our team is excellent. And so, but there's always lessons learned after each challenge process, and we always kind of debrief, like, how could we do this better? What was the timeline? What were some of the technicalities that we got hung up on? And from lessons learned for us, I think, over communication, right? So we erred on the side of caution with webinars and technical support and assistance, and open office hours and open doors, and even taking feedback from our providers like, hey, you know, this data point isn't working really well in the portal, can you fix it? 24 hours later, we fixed it. I think given all the time frames that the NTIA has, and they're really short, and they feel almost impossible, but I get the sense of urgency. We all want broadband out there, but for us, I think managing those timelines, making sure you're always anticipating what's ahead, and then getting back to the NTIA really quickly. Like, you know, they would give you like 2 weeks to cure. You know, we would send it back in 24 hours. That's how you get through a process real quickly. And so, you know, we were constantly on it, understanding the formats. I think that was a real challenge for our team. Like the NTI had a format that we weren't using, or even the coding, some of the coding wasn't quite, you know, on the same page. And so in terms of the classification for challenges, so working with the NTIA was really critical in ensuring that Colorado could stay, you know, stick to our schedule as far as the challenge process goes. And so, you know, just a few takeaways: understanding the formats. If you don't get it, turn it around quickly, talk to the NTI quickly, leverage them, lean on them, and then, you know, do friendly nudges, like, hey, we're still here. But yeah, I think, you know, those are things that, you know, we definitely implemented in our challenge process, and I would see them as really successful.
Hey, Scott, if I could jump back in for
Please,
just a
go ahead.
second.
This is a conversation. Please
just to
jump
be
in.
real here,
Absolutely.
right? And this should not be a secret. And I would invite one of the other directors to throw a microphone at me if I'm telling something incorrectly here.
I was getting to the spicy part in just a second.
Thanks. Yeah. Here's some paprika for you, right? The no state challenge process is going to produce a flawless map. Right. Period, right? Like in Virginia, we're having conversations about how do we make sure in the long run we can ensure universal connectivity, not just for a map that happens to be at 99% accuracy at one snapshot in time. There's going to be places we're not going to get to under BEAD because they're building a home right now, for example. They're not on the BDC fabric. Or a federal award defaults after we certify our challenge results. This is a long game here, and beyond BEAD as well. And it's because the challenge processes are going to be close to flawless, but not perfect.
I'm going to get back to NTIA in just a second, but for Peter and Jade, I want to ask you about where are the gaps? Like with the funding that your states received, is that going to be enough to connect all of unserved and underserved communities? And if not, what plan do you have to address those deficiencies and gaps? So Peter, we'll start with you, then we'll come to Jade.
Sure. So I think, you know, the answer that I always give is that I'm not going to rest until we have universal coverage, right? So the BEAD program is going to give us universal coverage. We believe that we have just enough money to do that. Now, how good is the coverage going to be? That's going to be the real question, right? I mean, I think the question is going to be like, what kind of technologies are we going to be using? Are we going to have areas that we have to use, unlicensed fixed wireless or satellite, or things that NTIA, and I hate that they use this word, but they call them unreliable, broadband. Like, are we going to be, how many areas are going to be using those kinds of technologies versus technologies that are fiber or licensed fixed wireless? We have been working really hard and really diligently since we created our state broadband office and our state broadband grant program. We think through 2 rounds of what we've done that we really do have enough money to get to where we're going. But the big outlier for us, right, is that there's a lot coming that we can't foresee. And the thing that I always talk about with our statewide grant program is we did about 100,000 addresses in our first program. And in those 100,000 addresses that we did, we have right now, with a single utility, there are 55,000 outstanding permits for pole replacements that are over 2 years old, right? 55,000. At the beginning of this year, it was over 120,000. And so those projects aren't getting built not because I don't have the people or the resources or the money, but because I can't get the poles flipped, right? We just had a conversation with Columbia Gas, and they told us that, look, we don't have enough locators, right? If you're going to go underground all this stuff and you anticipate that we can do a location on 5.5 miles worth of undergrounding in 24 hours, we can't, So these are some of the things that are going to be the things that increase the amount of money that it's going to cost to get things out there. So while as of today, right this second, if I look at my map and go like, hey, is the roughly $800 million that Ohio has enough to cover it? The answer I give today is yes, but 2 years from now, with delays, with unanticipated NEPA costs, with increases in costs due to everybody needing fiber at once, everybody needing poles at once, everybody needing, everything from vaults to circuit boards to whatever you need, right? This isn't going to be the this is the general 2% growth that our states typically see in broadband coverage. This is going to be an insane amount of growth, and it's going to be nationwide. So, like I said, I believe that we will have a plan for universal coverage. I believe that we're going to be able to accomplish it. I believe it's going to take every single dollar that I have. I don't know that we're going to have any non-deployment dollars right now, but I think we can get there. But at the 3 mountain connects from now, you can ask me whether or not that stays true just due to unanticipated costs. Now, the state of Ohio, because of the reality, has created a pole replacement program. I know a lot of other states do this too, but we have the ability to cover just about 75% of the make-ready cost for pole replacement because we see that that's going to be the big variable going forward. But again, we just don't know, once the money starts flowing and everyone's making a run on all the fiber that's produced domestically all at once, is it going to be enough money? I don't know.
I'll be really brief and say that Kansas understands the assignment. I don't anticipate them submitting a final proposal that does not include universal connectivity and gig symmetrical services to every CAI. That being said, there will be a technology mix involved. It's no secret that the western states got highly shortchanged in the BEAD allocation decision. So there will be a lot of states that will be in a position to have a more fixed wireless, which will tee us up to another multi-billion-dollar investment in 15 or 20 years. I did want to point out one thing, and that is something that Peter really touched on is this hurdle we have with poles, locators. We're going to have it with workforce development. We're going to have digital equity needs. All of these non-deployment, but actually pretty deployment heavy or related adjacent activities are not going to happen in those states that got shortchanged. There's probably about 15 of them, and you're going to hear all of these wonderful creative programs in states that got $1 to $1.5 billion. They're throwing tens of millions of dollars at programs for more locators or for pole replacement, and I'm excited to see that happen because that's what needs to happen. But when you hear about that and you think, well, why isn't our state doing that? It's because there's not enough money. And the ultimate goal of this is to get every household connected, and everything else is cherry on the top, and that's unfortunately not going to be available for many states.
Right. Next question is for each of you, and I know some of you may not be able to answer totally, but I want to know, what is it like working with NTIA? What's the role of working with NTIA? Chandler, we'll start with you and we'll come back down, because I know each of you have very different experiences. Can you share with the audience briefly what's your experience been like?
I'm happy to explain our approach here. It's all about very clearly communicating where states have flexibility versus what's the mandate provided by NTIA to run your grant program. We start every presentation in Virginia with a PowerPoint slide that kind of shows a flow chart of NTIA to state broadband offices to grantees. And then, by the way, there's this thing called NIST over here on the side that we also have to meet compliance regs with. So it's just about clearly communicating where states have flexibility and where they don't. Don't take unnecessary heat in this process, right? And make sure that that's clearly passed along to grantees about where these requirements are coming from.
Yeah, I will just mention that there are a lot of stakeholders in this process. NTIA, state broadband offices, communities, providers, and other applicants. And it's easy to kind of villainize any one of those because some of our priorities are a little bit competing. I think NTIA is made up of a lot of passionate people who are trying to do legacy building work, but they don't have all the answers either. And so, I think Kansas kind of gets a bad rap for being maybe a little bit rogue with NTIA, but it's not an us versus them mentality. It's that I know that NTIA, I'm not sure I believe in that hierarchy because the consumer should be at the top, right? This is about connecting American households and like every Kansan. That's who I'm thinking of before I think of NTIA. So I have a great deal of respect for them. Working with them in a process of co-creation is how I see it. So they don't have all the answers. They have to follow very strict guidelines under intense political pressure. I respect that, but when I'm on the ground in my communities and I'm hearing things that I know aren't going to work with some of the guidance, I feel it is my duty to advocate and push back. So that better defines our relationship, I would say.
I'll illustrate with a story. In Mississippi, we're administering a broadband infrastructure program grant with NTIA. And during that process, we had something we needed to report and talk with NTIA about it. And they said, oh, well, you need to do that on such and such form. Like, oh my gosh, where do we download that? Oh, we haven't created it yet. We'll have it in about a month. So they're working through these processes as well. One of the keys that we have had in Mississippi is working with our federal program officer. Every state is assigned a federal program officer from NTIA. I understand there are various types of relationships with federal program officers around the different state broadband offices, but we have had a great relationship with ours in Mississippi, and he's been able to advocate for some of the ideas that we've had or flexibility that we've needed in Mississippi. And so that FPO is key.
Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tension between, the states who, on the ground are looking at their states and going like, hey, I know the reality is we have data as to, what people's experiences are with their providers. We have data with, what has and hasn't worked. And then trying to work with NTIA to say like, hey, this is the uniqueness of Ohio and we really want to do it this way, and NTIA just, saying no. And so what we've tried to work out is, and I think the difficulty and the tension comes into that, NTIA, when they look at our state plans, frequently go, this is non-compliant, and then in conversations with them, they can't always tell you like, well, this is what is compliant, right? And so some of the things for why like Ohio takes a little bit longer to get things done is because when you come up with kind of a unique idea and say like, this is what we're trying to accomplish, it can take a lot of different iterations of that idea before, the NTIA says, oh, now we can actually accept what you're doing. So there's a lot of, like I said, just a lot of tension back and forth where, we're trying to make sure that Ohio has what it needs to have a successful program with the providers, with our nonprofits, with our local leaders, and still be compliant with the requirements of the NTIA.
I mean, look, the reality is NTIA has had to scale organizationally at the rate at which we have to deliver our plans to the constituents in every one of our states. So as an organization, NTIA has had to organizationally grow and scale. At the same time, they have to real-time process 50 different state plans, or 50 state plans in, I think, 6 territories. It's a lot of work. And so from the perspective of Louisiana, the governor's always said, look, if you're in a position to move quickly, work urgently, and have a proactive, constructive relationship with the NTIA to the point where you can actually influence their decision-making and influence the way they create policies and execute policies, then by all means do that as much as that you can. And so, to the folks, to Sally's point, et cetera, we have a great federal program officer that covers both Louisiana and Georgia. And so we have often iterative conversations about, hey, this is what people are thinking on the ground. This is what we think. And so let's bubble that up to NTIA and try to see if there's a solution and workaround based on a certain policy or based on a certain issue or challenge that exists. And so we've had a very proactive, constructive relationship with NTIA where we bubble things up and they tell us, look, you can do this, you can do that, you might need to focus on this a little bit more as opposed to something else. And so that's the approach that we've always taken in Louisiana.
Yeah, and my approach is very similar. Colorado, we have a great FPO, Sarah Smith, back there. She covers Colorado and Wyoming, and she is a former CBO alum. So she gets us, right? She gets our state. So we really benefit from that. I felt like it was a really seamless transition for Colorado, and our relationship with the NTA has been generally very positive. And very collaborative. You know what you can and can't do. And sometimes when they don't know, they don't like. Especially what I appreciate is like when we're seeking guidance and it hasn't been developed. Like I appreciate the honesty. Like, hey, we haven't figured this out yet. but we'll get that to you. Like not being in the dark is really key for Colorado, and I appreciate that the NTIA is honest. And yeah, they change your mind. You know, sometimes you run a policy or an idea up the flagpole. Maybe you got some information that was, okay, maybe we can do this, and then you got excited about it, and the NTIA came back and said no. It's disappointing, but I get it. You know, I understand. And you know, and I said this the other day, you know, the NTIA is a federal agency. The federal agency is not designed to move with any sort of quickness. Like, it is inherently slow. And I can say that because I've worked with the feds. I've worked for the feds for a very long time. Great people behind all the bureaucracy. They want the same things. And I always remind myself, when we're not always synced up on certain ideas and strategies, we all want the same thing. We want universal connectivity. There's several ways to get there. Personally, I don't think broadband's that complicated from an infrastructure perspective. But I also understand that we have an obligation to taxpayers as well to make sure that we're following the rules, that we're vetting and we're running everything through the proper channels. It takes a little bit of time, but I do appreciate the NTIA. We have a great relationship, and with Beneath, you know, like at some point you get to a point where you have great collaboration and you can shape policy. And Colorado has done that numerous times in the NTIA's program, and it's really nice. They can't do everything. I don't know if there's never a program where you get 100% yes. For all the no's that we've received, I'm like, hey, there's a space for this in our state broadband program. And so we've tweaked our own state broadband program based on some of the ideas and strategies that were good ideas for the NTIA, but just they couldn't execute for legal reasons or so forth. And we've carved out really great spaces in our existing programs to kind of be that stopgap. So it's been a lot of really great thought leadership. And I'm really proud of Colorado. I'm really proud of our NTIA for doing this. And to Vineet's point, this is a complicated program. The most complicated program I've ever seen, and quite honestly, I'm really fascinated by it when the sausage making all happens. So for me, it's really interesting from a nerdy perspective. But we do have a great relationship with the NTIA, and we'll get there, and we'll all have really great stories and about how it went down. Three Mountain Connects from now, right?
That's right. That's the trigger. 3 months. We only have time for a couple more questions, but Brandy and Vineet, I want to come back to you because your programs are actually going live this year soon, and both of you are working on, your offices are working with NTIA on very unique sub-grantee processes and sub-grantee model agreements. If you can speak a little bit to that and the progress that particularly those in the provider community can expect to see when applying for and hopefully being sub-recipients of your grant programs.
Yeah, so we have, right now, we went out for public comment on our grant guidelines, our project areas, which also includes our grant agreement. I will tell you, our grant agreement is, I don't want to brag on it too much because we are in the Office of Information Technology, and there is a lot of information technology stuff that is not relevant. But I will tell you that in our grant agreement, you know, and again, it's a draft, so we're looking for comments, and you know, all the provisions in there, you know, our providers are they're gonna be held accountable towards. You know, we tried to bake in our agreement some process-friendly sort of, you know, some measures, but ultimately, you know, that grant agreement template's out there, and all the provisions in that grant agreement will be required of our grantees. And we wanted to put it out early because I think people need to understand when they're applying to BEAD, it's a complicated program. It's very expensive to monitor and track. We wanted to go into everybody's eyes wide open, like this is what you're going to, this is a standard you will be held to. I know that sounds really intimidating. The state of Colorado is here to walk you through it, to help you. We have a ton of technical assistance on those provisions in that grant agreement. But again, we wanted to put that information out there sooner rather than later so that you can make determinations in your grant applications on how you're going to account for those requirements.
Yeah, and look, quickly, look, in a nutshell, providers also have a choice. They have a choice on which states they need to invest. They have a choice on how they allocate capital. And so from our perspective, and in partnership with the governor, we've tried to make our application process and the sub-grantee draft of the agreement, which we'll push out very soon, as administratively easy as possible. That is critical. You have to be in a position where you maximize competition for the project areas that you have. So for instance, our application areas for those providers that know what they're doing can actually fill out applications, within 20, 25, 30 minutes, especially if it's 1 or 2 or 3 different project areas that they're hyper-focused on. We passed through state law a couple of months ago the ability to release 10% of the funds upon the signing of a grant agreement. And NTIA does allow, through uniform guidance and through the guidance that they released last December, that you can actually increase the amount of funds that you can provide to providers before you start to do the technical audits. And those are the kinds of things that we're doing, because the faster we, frankly, can release funds to companies, whether it's LEO or fixed wireless or fiber providers, to participate in our process, then the faster then they can address the speed to deployment issue throughout the state.
All right, well, we're coming to time, close to time. We've got one final question for you all. There's so much more that we haven't even talked about in terms of post-award compliance plans, use of non-deployment funds, digital equity, that there also will be capacity grants that you all will be implementing as well. But I want to ask one final question to each of you, 30 seconds or less. What are you most excited about, and what are you most worried about as we enter into this next phase of your deployment? Chandler, we'll start with you, and we'll work all the way down in with Brandy.
In terms of excitement, maybe this is just a bland response here, but we're going to get the job done in Virginia under the BEAD program, right? But the key to that is going to be managing expectations of the construction build-out over the next 5 years. Last week we handle constituent messages in our broadband office. I had a constituent reply back to an email that I sent him 3 years ago, which you guys are in business is like the ultimate what the hell, what's going on here? Replying back to an email 3 years ago when I told him he was in an application area for broadband expansion. It's 3 years past that point now. The project's funded, it's underway, but it still hasn't built out to that constituent's location. So we've got to do a great job of managing expectations under BEAD, clearly communicating when we expect to get under construction and expect to deliver on those projects for folks like that to be clear about when this program's actually going to deliver at the individual level.
I think I'm most excited about those communities and historically disconnected populations that have been left behind for so long and had promises broken for so long. I'm so excited that they are going to get connected. And what I'm most worried about is that this process will become political after the election, and that it might affect the success of all the work we've been building up to. So really a little bit nervous about that, and again, why I'm so keyed in on final proposal and hoping that those final proposals can be submitted quickly and approved quickly so we can just get it done.
I'm very excited about the opportunities that this gives to rural residents of Mississippi who do have just this untapped potential to offer to their communities, to our nation, and just this opportunity. It's going to make us smarter, it's going to make us healthier. So many different issues with quality of life can be alleviated by this build out. I'm concerned about a lot of things. Managing expectations is very difficult in this program. I have some of those emails as well. But I'm concerned that there are groups that are not going to, ISPs are not going to participate because this is a complex federal program. I think that is the beauty of this program, that there was a requirement for a state broadband office to be there on the ground to help walk you through it. So I'm worried about our participation. I'm worried that we do have some rural areas of the state that no one's going to step up for, and it's going to require some collaboration and some interesting partnerships, I think, to get those areas covered.
Really quickly, Peter, we got to wrap up. But
all right, I'll go super fast. So what I'm excited about is what comes next, and what I mean by that is the state of Ohio did an awesome project with the Ohio State University Molly Kieran Agricultural Center, and we got to see a huge amount of technology that's deployed in a test field, whether it be modern irrigators that use less than the pressure needed from well water, so you don't actually have to go buy water and put it on an irrigator, you can actually use your own well, and a whole bunch of other cool technology. So that's what comes next. So once we can get to areas that don't have broadband today, we need to get to see what the cool thing that is that comes next. And the thing that I'm most worried about is the things I can't control, right? So like the fact that there aren't enough wooden poles to replace everything, the fact that there aren't enough locators, those are the things that keep me up at night, because I can give ISPs all the money in the world, and if they literally don't have the physical resources or the human beings to go do the thing, it's still not going to get built.
All right, I'm going to be quick. Ditto, 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 ditto. I'm done.
Yeah, and I'm just really briefly, I'm just excited about bridging the digital divide. I know it's ongoing. I'm excited for rural Colorado. I'm excited for those that live on the urban fringes where you weren't the right block to go serve, but your neighbors have service. And I'm just excited for the state. I'm excited for our country. We have a lot of really great leadership. And so, and what keeps me up at night is making sure all those people, all the ISPs apply, bid on our really tough areas. So ditto, repeat, ditto. Thank you guys for coming to Colorado and being part of Mountain Connect. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and thank our hero and shero panelists, our SBO directors. Thank you very much.
Hello? Oh, thank you. Sorry, we ran over a little bit. That was my fault. So I apologize, but it's my 10-year anniversary. So anyways, our sessions are starting right now, so please go and enjoy our breakout sessions. Thank you very much.